Good evening. Welcome to the second program in this year's 2017 Adult Summer Reading Program. For those of you who don't know, at the back of the room, here is the Adult Summer Reading Program game card. The objective is to read 5 books or read 3 books and go to 2 of the events listed on the back. All of our summer events for adults are back here. You've already got one down, you're here. So if you haven't already registered, you can pick up a card, or you can register online, srp.icpl.org, and you can do it all online, or you can fill out the card. I use it as a bookmark. Like I said, tonight is the second program in the summer reading program, and it's on paddling the Iowa River water. I'm just going to give you just a little bit of the blurb. The Iowa River Water Trail provides 72 miles of unobstructed paddling from Iowa City to the Mississippi River. I did not know that. Our guest tonight is Johnson County Conservation Program Manager, Brad Freidhof, who is also a member of the Iowa River Friends, which is how I talked him into doing this program. So he's going to tell us all about having fun on the Iowa River.
All right.
Take it away.
Well, thank you for having me tonight. I'm going to try to cover a lot of stuff tonight, and I'll talk about that in the middle. But this is the poster, so if you see this, you're in the right place. I think I have to get this mouse up here to make this thing go. So a little bit about myself first, because anytime you take advice about going out on a river, you should take it from somebody that's knowledgeable and knows what they're talking about. So you don't know me from Adam, so you should know that I know a little bit something about canoeing. So this is from one of our great river cleanup events, and I love this picture because that's me in my element. I told Beth when I was preparing for tonight, it's really hard to talk about paddling indoors. I'm more of a get out and do it, and Mel's always encouraging me, hey, let's take this group of people out on the river, and I need to do more of that because that's really where I'm in my element. So a little bit about myself. I've been in the county conservation field for about 20 years. I grew up in northeast Iowa, spent a lot of time on the upper Iowa and Turkey rivers. My family farm is on Crane Creek, which is a tributary for the Turkey River. I've been a naturalist for most of my career. I spent 5 years in Pocahontas County, and then I came down here and I was the naturalist here in Johnson County till 2014. At that time, the Johnson County Conservation Board was looking for somebody to fill a new position, and that position was a conservation program manager. And I applied for that position and was selected for that job. And so my new role is I oversee our environmental education program, and then I assist with special projects, including trail development. And when we talk about trails, we're going to talk about all trails. That's including water trails, hard surface trails, soft surface trails, all those different things. So this is me, and this is what I'm going to be sharing some of my knowledge and experiences being out on the water with you tonight. So what are we going to talk about? Everybody always asks, well, that poster was kind of vague. Well, I like vague stuff because I can go where the audience wants to go. But I'm going to talk about basic canoeing and kayak floats. Okay, how do you get out there? We're going to discuss the Iowa River Water Trail, and we're going to discuss other paddling opportunities and destinations here in Johnson and County and surrounding areas. So you want to go on a canoe float. What do you need to know? Well, first of all, you need to be able to plan your float. Okay, so we're going to select a route. So for here in Johnson County, we only have one designated water trail that goes any particular direction, and that's a designated water trail. So if you select that, you're going to pick up a map and you're going to learn where your route is. You're going to obtain some equipment. What do you think? Does anybody have any specific equipment they like to use? Kayakers? Is there any kayakers out there? A few kayakers. Any canoers? I'm old school. I love canoes yet. And then there are also people that are now doing the SUP, the stand-up paddle boards. And if you're really good at that, you're amazing because that takes phenomenal core strength and balance and agility. So I'm not at that level, but you're going to need one of those. You're going to need life jackets, okay? So when we're planning this trip, you can forget about doing any of it if you don't have this equipment. So life jackets, when I tell people you've never been out and you're going to go canoeing for the first time, get a life jacket that's comfortable, okay? So this is my life jacket. I wear this thing around all the time when I'm on the water, whether I'm canoeing, kayaking, or I'm just out there working, because this keeps me safe, okay? You can be the best swimmer in the world. You can have worked around water your entire life, but if I hit my head on a rock, this is what's going to keep me alive, or keep me where somebody can rescue me, okay? If we're talking about cold weather, and I'll talk about cold weather at the end, this is also very important to keep me alive, okay? So get a life jacket, or PFD as they're sometimes referred to, because can be the difference between life and death out there on the water. Paddles. You need to have one paddle for each person, and I also recommend that you take a spare every time you head out there in the water. You're going to need to have a seat or something that keeps you comfortable. A lot of times, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I like to take a seat with me, and there's a variety of different seats you can get out there, but this is a really simple one. It buckles to the seat in my canoe. It gives me some back support, and that gives me something to push off of when I'm paddling, okay? So I like to have a seat. I didn't bring a throw bag in here. Is everybody familiar with a throw bag? So a throw bag is a simple piece of equipment that can be very important. It's basically a bag with a flotation material on one end and a rope coming out the other end. You hang on to the piece of the rope. It usually has a loop on it, and that can be used to throw to people that are in distress. They can also be used if you need to tie your canoe off to something and you didn't bring a piece of rope with you. So I always encourage people to bring those. I also like to take dry bags, and usually I carry a lot of them. Depending on the length of my trip, and when you're planning your trip, these are things you're going to want to think about. I like to take dry bags, okay? The reason for that is today I carry all kinds of goodies with me. Wallets, keys, cell phones, cameras, and most of those electronic devices, guess what? They don't do very well in the water, okay? Although some of them are water resistant, okay, if they get in too much water, they're not going to operate very well. So these dry bags are really nice. Very simple to operate. You're going to put all your materials in there. You're going to fold this over, and you're just going to roll it up, okay? And then when you get it rolled up nice and tight, you're going to clip it. And you see it works real nice because it's holding air in there, okay? So that tells me that it's dry. I also have another very important buckle on there. Does anybody know what this buckle might be used for? This is what attaches it to you or your canoe. Now, like I said, I spent a lot of time in my youth going up to the upper Iowa River and canoeing, and there were a lot of times that people would overturn their canoes and they would lose everything that was in it, okay? Because although you may be very quick, that water's moving very quick, and a lot of that stuff gets swept downstream. If you're going to be going on a longer trip, say you're going to do the whole float from Iowa City down to the Mississippi River, which would be sweet, okay? Great weather, you can get away from everything, and you're just going to be hanging out on the river, okay? You might want to take a big dry bag. You could put all your clothes in there, camping gear in there, you might have food in there, okay? A lot of times coolers can also work as a dry bag, but again, you're going to have most of your food in there. So these are what I recommend, and this one's a backpack model, so if I do have to portage around, which in this river scenario, we don't have a lot of portages, but if I would have to, I can pack this up, take my canoe, and go. A first aid kit and a signaling device. I always have a first aid kit with me on my vest, okay? You see I have all these buttons and things hanging out of here. There's a lot of things that I just always leave on my life jacket. One of them is a signaling device, a whistle, okay? For those of you that haven't been out on the river, rivers change quite rapidly, even ones like the Iowa River that has a dam in it. The Army Corps of Engineers doesn't give us each a call and say, hey, we're going to start releasing water, or we're going to start holding water. And so those water levels can fluctuate rapidly. So there are chances that you can get stranded out on a river, okay? Within the last 2 weeks, there were 3 people that were stranded on the upper Iowa River tubing. Now, they were very fortunate because one of the people was able to hike out. They were able to find help, and the fire department up there used drones to locate the other 2 tubers, and they were able to get them out of there. But you want to be able to notify somebody around you that, hey, I'm in trouble and I need help. So whistles are really good because they carry a long ways. A bilge, a baler, or a sponge. If you're a farm kid, no, it's not that kind of baler. It's a cup, something you're going to bail water out of there. I always carry this old classic, just project aware sponge. So this, you can see it's nice and dusty, okay? You're going to collect a lot of dust and sand and other debris out of the bottom of your canoe. A lot of times I will just put this on my ankle, little rope, and leave it at the bottom of the canoe. And then when I get to a spot, I can wring it out and keep the water from building up in my canoe. Sunscreen, insect repellents, hats, sunglasses, all things personal safety we need to have, and then proper attire. Okay, Jim and Urban and I were talking before, you know, he's gone on a lot of different floats, takes his granddaughter with him, and she wore out a pair of sandals one year because the water levels were so low, the terrain was so rocky, it just ate up her shoes. So imagine if you would have done that without good footwear. Look at what your feet would have been like. So you want to have that. Now, I'm not saying our rivers and streams are dirty, but sometimes if you don't have proper foot attire on, you can get cuts and you can get infections. We have known people here in Johnson County that have gotten severe infections and have actually ended up in the hospital. And then it's also important to bring adequate water and food for yourself as you travel down there. It's very easy to get dehydrated out on the water because it's sunny, there's a lot of reflection, and sometimes down in those valleys, there can be very little airflow. So those are all things you need to have with you. Now, for me, a lot of times I have all that stuff packed up, ready to go. It's just sitting in the garage, right? So I can just pick it up and go? No. Very important. Last thing I put on there, check your equipment for needed repairs and replacement, okay? A lot of times people may have wooden paddles or other things that they may take out and they just put them up there and then they take them and they don't check them and maybe one of your wooden paddles is split and it breaks halfway down the trip. That's not very functional, it's not very safe. So make sure you see those things and replace them as necessary before you head out on the water. That's a very problematic thing. So the last thing I'm going to talk about in your plans is probably the most important, and that is to actually have a float plan. So a lot of people say, well, what's a float plan? Okay? It's basically what it says it is. I'm going to float, here's how I'm going to do it, here's my plan. So on that plan, you want to have your location and the route you plan to go on. So I'm going to go from Sturgis Ferry to Hills. That's the very first segment of the Iowa River Trail. Or I'm going to go out to Terry Trueblood, or I'm going to Lake McBride, okay? You want to have the time you plan to go and the time you plan to return. Why is that important? If I come out looking for you, I want to go, oh, this vehicle's here, they're supposed to be here at 8 o'clock, they got another 45 minutes before I'm going to get real concerned, okay? If I don't know and I start getting worried, that may be a concern that I don't need to have. So always put in there departure time and return time. Designate a float leader, okay? If you're a new or a novice paddler, I always encourage people, especially on new bodies of water, to go out with somebody that's been there before, okay? A lot of times people are uncomfortable trying new experiences, even on a simple river like the Iowa River, because they're just not sure what they're going to encounter. So go with people. If you're an avid canoer, encourage people to come with you. Take them out there on the river and give them those new opportunities, those new experiences. So if you do have a person, designate them as a leader and write down their contact information, name, phone numbers, things like that. Include descriptions of your boats. This spring, we ended up with several canoers and kayakers that got stuck on the north end of the Corville Reservoir. And they got them out of there, but they didn't get their boats out. So the Coast Guard Auxiliary now has stickers that you can put on your boats that if they do get lost, they blow off your beach or if you have a cabin along the river, they wash away, they can get them back to you. They can contact you quickly because do you know what conservation folks or law enforcement folks think when they find an empty boat? We're going to be looking for empty bodies too, okay? So we want to know that no, nobody was in that, it just washed away, okay? Include your transportation vehicles. Where did I leave my car, my truck? Who's going to pick me up if I don't have a vehicle at the front or the back side? Very important next item. Always calculate using river miles. I'll have a lot of times people go, well, it only takes me like 5 minutes to get to Hills. So I can probably do that in a few minutes, right? No. Okay? Rivers meander, they have changes. The water flow, the wind speed, all those things are going to affect how fast you paddle. So calculate how many river miles, and if you pick up one of our brochures back there, they're calculating in river miles. They will tell you how long it is from point A to point B. And then you have to calculate how long do you think it's going to take you. If you have an experienced paddler, they will tell you it's going to take us, with this water flow, X number of hours to get from point A to point B. Okay? Identify dangers along your route. So we'll talk about those a little bit later, but we're going to be talking about dams, sweeps, strainers, fences. Luckily, in this section of the Iowa River, we don't have to deal with very many fences because we're dealing with a meandered stream. The upper Iowa is a non-meandered stream. So when I was a kid, farmers could legally have barbed wire fence right across the river. And it was not uncommon for us to do the limbo, lay back in the canoe, first one of you goes under, then the next one. So know the river or stream you're going to be on. There's a lot of those smaller streams in northeast Iowa, which is very popular for canoeing, that will have fences for livestock and other reasons across them. Discuss as your team or with your partner or whoever you're going with how you're going to mitigate for those hazards. There's going to be a fence here. How are we going to get out and portage around it? We're going to try to go under it. Know about those and how you're going to deal with it. Identify your water conditions, flow rates, winds, water, temperature, and weather. Those are all things you need to know. Those are all very important. And then leave your float plan with different people. Okay? I always encourage people to leave it in their vehicles, especially on the dash. That way if there's a conservation officer, park ranger, just landowner, they know, hey, they're floating. That's what they're doing. There's their plan. Okay? If you have friends or family, leave it with them as well. So always, probably the most important thing about going on a float is checking it out. So this is the Iowa River. So once you have your route, you're going to need to study your route. I went back there to that float plan. We look at route. We're going to need to study that route. And so here we are, and I don't think I have a pointer, but you can see way up at the top, there's Iowa City. Way down here at the bottom, this is the Mississippi River. So you can see at the top end, we have three very easy access points. Sturgis Ferry, which is in Iowa City Park, which is across from the Iowa City Airport. Hills Access, which is a Johnson County Conservation Park across from Hills on the Iowa River. And then River Junction, which is just south of Highway 22 on the Iowa River. Hills Access and River Junction are both approximately 9.5, 9.25 miles from their previous destination. So you can do an 18-mile float in a long day really nicely from Iowa City to River Junction. Okay? And then we have two smaller floats that are really nice as well. Now, to go from River Junction to our next is quite a jaunt. Okay? So we're working on that, but you can see there are multiple points throughout the stretch here. I'm going to see if this works. Oh, let's see if it's magic. So this, if you want to, maybe. No thanks, DNR. So if you want to learn more, this is the DNR's Paddling Iowa Water Trails. And they have all kinds of things over here on the left-hand column of how to paddle, where to paddle, maps, and brochures. Now here locally, if we wanted to check things out, if we go to the maps and brochures, it's going to bring up all these fancy ones that they're building up. But then down here at the bottom, Iowa River Trail, it's going to open up our little map. And there's the access point. So this is going to be some of that other information you're going to have on there. So you can see between Sturgis Ferry down to Hills Access, 9.5 miles. Hills Access to River Junction, 9.8 miles. It also tells you a lot of the other things you need to know. The ramp types, they're hard surface ramps, so ours are concrete. Are there restrooms? Sturgis Ferry, that's kind of deceiving. It says no, but right now there's porta-johns out there. But you can see at Hills Access, we have camping and restrooms. River Junction, the same thing. So if you're planning a long float trip, those are things you're going to want to know, and those are in the brochures that are in the back. Beth has some over there if you want to pick some up. So if you're going to new regions and you want to say, okay, I've done the Iowa River a million times, I want to explore some other ones. see if it'll go back to this. You can go to any of these other ones, the Des Moines River, North Raccoon, all these different locations, and you can click on one of those, and they're going to give you those maps with the same information. The Maquoketa River, oh, that's in development. Lower Des Moines River would be a close one to here. Buchanan, the Wapsipinicon River, those would both be close ones to here. So the same information that I'm talking about tonight pertaining to the Iowa River can also pertain to those rivers, and you can go out and explore those areas as well, okay? I'm going to click out of this and go back. Okay, so like I said, these maps provide all the necessary information. Here in Johnson County, we're kind of particular. So we like to put out 911 addresses at each one of our boat ramps. So as you get in, there's a blue sign there that has a 911 address on it. That's really important information, because if you get in trouble on the river and they say, "Where are you at?" and you go, "I'm on the Iowa River." And they're going, "Yeah, where?" And so if you can give them some 911 locations, "I'm between Sturgis Ferry and Hills," or these two 911 addresses, that gives us some locations to send out rescue parties to try to locate where you're at. Okay? Not every fire department has like Decorah and can send out drones and locate you. Okay? You also need to know the flow rate of the river you're going on. And so here's the U.S. Geological Service site, and this is where I go to. We'll see if we can get her to come up here. Okay, so obviously I'm looking at the Iowa River here. I want to go down to the Iowa Basin, okay, and then I'm looking for Iowa City. Let's go, yeah, we'll go Iowa River at Iowa City. Okay, so here's the Iowa River at Iowa City. Stop. Go away, meeting. So, is it the program? There we go. So you can see last week, early when I floated the Iowa River, it was flowing pretty good. Okay, we were doing a pre-float for a canoe race we had out there last Saturday, and this week it's dropped significantly. Okay, if it gets too much lower, it's going to be can be somewhat hard to navigate, especially if you aren't familiar with the river. I like to tell beginning paddlers that I like to have a CFS, cubic feet per second, outflow of between 3 and 5,000 cubic feet per second. Mel, do you tell them any different, or you have different numbers you like to go on? No. Jim, do you have any? Depends on the river. Yeah, so it depends on where you're at. Now, where you're going, you're going to need to talk to locals or people that are familiar. Here, I like cubic feet per second. I like flow rate. Other places, they're going to tell you, well, we're going to go off of elevation. We want to go when the river's at 13 foot, okay? And that's a flood gauge elevation rather than, or not an elevation, a height, right? Is that what I'm talking about? So depending on where you go, you're going to look at different numbers. But this is what I'm familiar with here. When I was in northwest Iowa on the Des Moines River, it was different. We went off of flood gauges and the height of the river. Okay? So these are the good numbers. Now, the scary thing about these numbers is you can see what happens. June 8, we went from 3,300 all the way down to almost 2,800 real fast. Why is that? Are all rivers going to have these drastic changes like this? No. The reason we have drastic changes around here is because we have the Coralville Reservoir, and they use the dam to moderate water flow, whether what's happening upstream or what's happening downstream. The Iowa River moderates, the Coralville Reservoir moderates the flood activity on the Iowa River, as well as the Cedar River. Remember, the Cedar River doesn't have any flood control structures on it, so if they get a lot of water moving down the Cedar River, a lot of times they will hold back water here to let that flush through the system. We don't want to be dumping the Iowa and Cedar River out at the same time because we're going to flood southeast Iowa. So there's a lot of different things. So go to the U.S. Geological Survey and get those information, those numbers that you need to tell you how much flow you should have. And if you're not familiar with that stuff, there are a lot of listservs out there that people that love paddling, they'll be talking all the time. And those people that have a certain body of water that they love to go on, they will know what flow rates you need to have to go out there. And then I gave you that information on the bottom already. Know your flow rates. So what are some of the dangers that you're going to incur? Does anybody recognize that? If you don't, you haven't lived in Iowa City long enough. So this is the Burlington Street Dam. Although I'd love the Burlington Street Dam to disappear, I don't think it'll ever will, at least in my lifetime. There are a lot of infrastructure items that run through the middle of that dam for the University of Iowa, and so I suspect that dam will always be there. Now, could it be modified? Potentially, but that is one of our big hazards through town. We have that dam, we have the Corville Power Dam, and then the Corville Reservoir. If you miss that one, you're really in trouble, right? So those are the two dams that we have to be cautious about. Now, why are dams so problematic? Well, they have this recirculating effect, a great hydraulic force, that if you get caught in it, it's just going to continually push you back under and recirculate you. Okay, not a place you want to be. Can you survive it? Yes, people have done it. Is it something I recommend you try? No, because most people are not going to survive it. Okay, look for these types of signs: warning, dam ahead. Those are going to be what you need to be watchful of to keep yourselves out of those situations. Some other dangers, and for me particularly, I think these are more dangerous than the dam because dams are really easy to see sometimes. There's these big obstacles. Sometimes strainers and sweeps are not easy to see. People take them for granted. They go, oh, it's just a tree laying in the water. Okay? But that's what makes them so dangerous. So a sweeper is basically, it's a low-hanging branch or any type of obstacle that hangs out over the water. And it does just like it says it's going to. It's going to sweep you out of the boat. A lot of times people that are in a canoe or a kayak that are swept into those, they grab a hold of it. They think, oh, I'm going to hang on and it's going to help me from getting into a worse situation. Grabbing hold of it actually creates the worst situation. So as you grab a hold of that, your canoe keeps moving or kayak keeps moving, and it actually pulls you out of that boat. Okay? Now your boat's gone, it may have overturned, and you're hanging there in all this debris. Now, a sweep gets very dangerous if a strainer is associated with it below ground or below water. So a strainer is the same thing. Imagine this tree, but now below water. Okay? A lot of times these become very dangerous if they are on an outside bend and people can't control their canoes or kayaks and they get pushed up against them, because remember, that strainer is not stopping that water flow. So that water, you're stuck up against that, the water's hitting your canoe and it wants to try to roll your canoe. If you get into one of those, or if you hit a rock in the water, what do? You lean into that obstacle, okay? Because that's going to get the water underneath your boat and hopefully help push your boat out there. If you panic and you fall the way you hit the object and you fall the opposite direction, you're setting your canoe up to roll. And that's not what you want to have. You can see in this scenario, there's some type of debris, whether it's a kayak or canoe or just debris, stuck on that strainer. And the force of that water is very strong, and it's going to keep that debris pinned against that. So you want to keep away from those as much as possible. On a lot of bodies of water, people try to remove these. Later this year, on the Clear Creek stream, dumping into the Iowa River, we're going to do a cleanup event where we're going to go out and we're going to try to clear some of these out. That's a really nice stream, but it's really hard to navigate, especially for people that don't know what they're doing. So we're not going to go cut all this stuff out of here. You know, that log's very important, that stump, to keep that bank there, but we're going to cut out some of those sweeps and strainers to make it a little more accessible. All right, the other thing that's very problematic is cold shock and hypothermia. So a lot of you are probably aware of the young man that passed away on Lake McBride. Oh, it's been a few years now. But that really bothers me because he didn't have a life jacket on, very athletic kid, very smart kid, and he was taken from us way too soon. And a lot of people said, well, he was really athletic. How did that happen? They said, well, hypothermia doesn't kick in that quickly. No, it doesn't. The majority of the time, what happens to people is cold shock. We don't think about it. Hypothermia takes some time. But cold shock is a term used to describe rapid, linked, involuntary, detrimental physiological events that immediately cause you to lose your breath. So when you hit cold water, your body reacts by closing off your airways. They don't want you to suck that cold water in, right? So if your trachea closes up and you surface and your trachea is still closed, there's a better chance you're going to go back down, okay? So you want to keep yourself, if you have that cold shock, you do not want your body to have the opportunity to go back down, right? That's what these guys are for. So when you hit that water, and I'm gasping for air, I want this to keep me above water. So when my trachea does open back up and I can get a breath in there, I'm above water to get it. I don't want that trachea to open back up and my muscles relax enough that I can get a breath and I'm back under, because then what's happened? I'm sucking water in. I put myself in a really bad situation. Hypothermia, on the other case, is the loss of body heat that faster than you can replace it, okay? We've all been out there, we've been cold and we're shivering. That happens, but that takes a little bit more time for that to occur. So you have to be cautious of that. So I always tell people, if I'm taking them out, remember the rule of 120 degrees. It used to be a rule of 100, but now they've bumped it up. So that is taking the air temperature and the water temperature, and they must be 120 degrees or greater. If they're not, if you can't reach that 120 degrees, then you need to be wearing a wet or a dry suit when you're out there in the water. And that's going to help protect you from that, okay? We have lost numerous paddlers because it's been a nice sunny day out and it's January and I'm going to go canoeing or kayaking, and they don't take well, I'll stay dry. Always take those precautions to make sure you're safe and you're coming home at the end of your float. All right, and then as you progress, I always tell people go from flat to flow. So when you're training, if you're a rookie, I like to send people that are new to canoeing and kayaking out to Terry Trueblood or out to Lake McBride where it's flat, open water. There's a lot of people that can observe you and you can practice your techniques, okay? After you get acclimated, you know what you're doing, then you can hit some of this flow water, and that's pretty aggressive flow water. But the Iowa River, the Cedar River, some of those places that have more activity. Sometimes the Corville Reservoir can look like that, okay? I don't like to canoe the Corville Reservoir, but it is a place you can go. So from flat to flow, okay? So now we've got a little bit of what you're going to do to paddle. So you know all this stuff now, and you're going, well, where do I want to go? Well, I want to tell you why the Iowa River and the Iowa River Water Trail are the place to go. And the Friends of the Iowa River will tell you this as well. They'll share a lot of the same knowledge. So the Iowa River is a tributary of the Mississippi River. Very scenic route. It goes from here all the way back up in north central Iowa, if you know where Hancock County is. Very nice there. Hardin County has some very beautiful, picturesque, scenic stretches of the Iowa River. And they have a very active group up there as well. It has, in our general region, we have about 12,000 square miles of watershed. So there's a lot of water flowing into that. And in this area, it's classified as a meandered stream. And I explained that a little bit earlier. A meandered stream means that generally river users can access on foot the channel bottoms and stream banks up to the ordinary high water mark. Now, what's ordinary high water on the Iowa River nowadays? I don't know. But just kind of guess where there's not a lot of stuff, you can access that. Now, if you're on a body of water that is non-meandered, say the upper Iowa, technically, you're not supposed to get out. You're supposed to do your paddling, and you're supposed to stay on there unless you're on public lands or you have permission from the landowners. The landowners own the bottom of the river out, the hard surface at the bottom, okay? So those are some things you need to know. The great thing about the Iowa River, I see a beautiful sandbar. I can get one of my Iowa City Public Library books out, and I can hang out there for a couple hours reading a book and then continue my paddle. I can camp out there if I want to. So that's a great thing about the meandered streams in Iowa. Typically, these are the larger streams when we're talking in the state of Iowa. So, Iowa River Water Trail. Well, we have a designated trail since 2000. I think that should be 2011. I left one out. And it's the great thing about it is unimpeded by dams or other major hazards for 72 miles. Usually, trails are pretty small. So I did it and I don't want to do it again. We have 72 miles. And I doubt there are very few of us that have done that entire 72-mile stretch. And it is very different one section to the next. At the midway point of the Iowa River Trail, the Iowa and the Cedar Rivers come together and they actually double the width. So south of Columbus Junction, I believe the Iowa River is totally different than the section that we see up here. And again, here's a map of the the Iowa River going from Iowa City, Hills, River Junction, Columbus Junction. You can see there's where the Cedar and the Iowa River come together, all the way down to some of these smaller spots down here on the in Eliza County. So why is this such an amazing stretch of river? Well, I'm going to give you some of the cultural things, but first of all, there's more than 55,000 acres of natural areas that are located within 10 miles of this river access. That's pretty amazing for Iowa. Usually we have this little fingernail worth of public land, but we have a lot. There are a lot of great cultural, natural, and historic resources along this stretch of the river. This river here that Iowa City got established on, a lot of people take it for granted. You know, we were talking about it. Jim was joking, oh, there's a river that goes through this town. We have to remember the Iowa River has provided interior access for what is now the state of Iowa for thousands of years. From the Iowa OSA office, some of the earliest evidence goes back almost 10,000 years, okay, to 9,500 BC. That's a long time ago. And various cultures followed for over the next 10,000 years because they were drawn here because of the abundance of resources and things that existed in the Iowa River. We're going to talk a little bit about the history because I am enthralled by the history of the river. The reason we're here today is because of the history, what brought people here. Now, we know Native Americans here were here for a long time. One of the most important ones that I still gives me goosebumps when I think about it is Keokuk's Reserve. And so it was a 400 square mile reservation area that included most of the Iowa River Trail. That was a part of Keokuk's Treaty of September 21st of 1832. Now, for those of you that don't follow all the Native American history, Keokuk was a Sauk leader. And the U.S. government, they didn't really have good grasp on who was the leaders of what, but he was what they recognized. And he was recognized as the head chief of the Sac and Fox tribe, which was actually a combined Sauk and a Meskwaki tribes. And so they gave him the say of what was going on for these tribes. Well, Black Hawk was really upset with the expansion of the U.S. government into the West. And so Keokuk was able to neutralize some of Black Hawk's concerns, and because of that, they gave him this piece of ground. Now, I'm going to show you on their map what this piece of ground looks like, and if you've never looked at it, it's going to be really hard to read. Our maps are much different than how their maps are. Now, if you look at this, so this is the Mississippi River down here, okay? You see the cedar, the red cedar, right here. So you can see right about there is where Columbus Junction would have been. As you follow that up, you can also see the English River that comes in there. So just about Highway 22, maybe a little bit further north of that, where Peckman Creek now stands, or River Junction, that was all part of the Keokuk Reserve. Okay? Very special piece of ground. There was a lot of hunting, fishing, trapping that went on there. There were numerous villages along there, but very important piece of ground. They really worked hard to keep that. And that flows back along the Iowa River up into Johnson County. So a really cool map. We also had a lot of European settlement along the river. It provided transportation routes. It provided ways to move materials. And for early transportation, once European Americans started arriving here, they were moving things up the Mississippi River, but they said, how do we get them the rest of the way? We got them in Burlington. How do we get them up here? So in the early 1800s, they started using keel boats, and these were amazing things. They could move 20 to 40 tons of freight upriver. That blows my mind. And these were being pushed by 6 to 10 men on a crew. Okay? Now, I know the Native Americans did amazing things too, but that's an amazing feat. These were very popular on large rivers like the Iowa, the Cedar, and the Des Moines. And so later those things would be converted, those men would disappear, and they'd be using steamboats, but that was a pretty amazing feat. Now, between 1850 and 1870, these steamboats that were coming up the rivers that had replaced the keel boats, they were full of immigrants. Goods were important, but we were moving people here, okay? And there's a whole history of steamboats, and if anybody wants to read some of it later, I've got a little passage here on all the different steamboats that came up the Iowa River. But one of the first ones was the Science, and it was captained by S.B. Clark. And it ascended the Iowa from in low water up to Wapello. The first one that made it to Iowa City was a steamboat called the Ripple, and it never returned to Iowa City. The captain of that was Captain Jones, and he got up to Iowa City, and then he joined the Mormon trek heading out west. So there was a lot of history on steamboats being in the Iowa River all the way up to 1866. So we now use this as a transportation route or a recreational route. Well, this has been used since the beginning of time by all kinds of people traveling the Iowa River. Now here's another one that really intrigues me. So for those of you that are familiar, this is the blue line is the current Iowa River. Johnson County is in pink on the top. Louisa County is at the bottom. The Tri-County Bridge region. And we have a large section of river here that is no longer a part of the main channel. Okay. In the middle of that, where that X is a place called Buttermilk Falls. Buttermilk Falls is an area that has large glacial outdroppings, large boulders, and it's very rough water. And it was called Buttermilk Falls because many of those keel boats and steamboats traveling through there would upheave their merchandise trying to navigate through those falls. Now, sometime between 1875 and the early 1900s, that channel was cut off. But that water still stands there. And I've gone down and I've talked to locals in that region, and they say, yeah, there's all kinds of steamboats that were lost in that section of river, but to get to them today would be very difficult because over the years, that's become a dumping grounds. People drive cars right off the road into that section of water. So, but it is very unique. It is still part of the mapped river channel, and I love seeing it. There were also a lot of other things that were associated with these rivers, river trails, mills, dams, ferries, and bridges. Okay? All these things were part of the transportation mechanism back in the day. And so this is the Coralville Mills, which is now part of the Iowa River Power Plant. This structure actually burned down. So just a real quick thank you for the State Historical Society and the state archaeologists for all those pictures I used there, because that's a lot about the history. But I also want to talk a little bit about the natural resources in that section of the river, because I'm just as much enthralled with the natural resources as I am the cultural and historical resources. There are a lot of Native American burial grounds along that stretch of river, but there's a lot of really cool natural resources as well. So these are some of the mussels, and I've been out several times assisting with mussel surveys on this stretch of the Iowa River between here and Louisa County. And it's amazing. You know, we talk about how dirty and messed up the Iowa River is, you know, one of the dirtiest ones we got out there. But this segment of the Iowa River has both the highest diversity of species, the highest number of threatened and endangered species, and the largest number of living individuals of those endangered and threatened species. So it's one thing to go out there and find a shell and say, oh, these existed here at one time. It's another thing to go out and find them and say, wow, they existed and this one's still here, it's still alive. The other thing that's great about this section of river is this part of the Iowa River was part of the Higgins Eye Historic Range reintroduction. So the Mississippi River, we have all these locks and dams and the impacts that those are having on the Mississippi River. So for years now, the endangered species people, the Army Corps of Engineers are like, we really need to expand some of these populations. How are we going to do that? So they started a reintroduction program, and it's included the Cedar, the Iowa River, the Wapsipinicon River, and we're very fortunate to have located some of those Higgins Eye back in the Iowa River. So we take great pride in that, and it's very exciting to see that. And there's a lot of work being done by different agencies along the Iowa River to make sure these guys are successful. There's also a lot of work with these guys, okay? A lot of turtles and birds, all kinds of different things. But I'm a real sucker for reptiles, and so I love to see these big turtles out there. There's a lot of habitat reestablishment occurring. Judy with Earthview Environmental and the Iowa River Products, they've got a wetland bank out there. That's going to provide very important habitat. The Johnson County Conservation Board has bought land down there. Every little piece of that puzzle we can put back together is helping these guys. We were very fortunate recently to change some of the rules and regulations. Iowa had very weak turtle trapping regulations, and we were shipping those guys to China as fast as we could. We've locked that down again, and hopefully we can make sure some of these populations of turtles do a lot better. And this is another reason why this place is so important. Kind of the same range as Keokuk's Reserve. You see this sliver of color that comes down here all the way to the Mississippi River, ends about where Keokuk's Reserve would have stopped in Johnson County. Well, this is the first in the nation reptile and amphibian and reptile conservation area. And this, for the state of Iowa, the majority of reptiles and amphibians that are found in the state of Iowa are found in that little sliver. So you can take all the rest of the state of Iowa, and we probably still have more right there in that little sliver. So this has been identified, documented, and mapped to say we're going to work really hard on all of our conservation efforts to protect this corridor because of the variety, the diversity, the population expansion, or population, what do I want to say, size that exists in this region. And so that's very important here. So those are all really important reasons why I enjoy going out there. So what are some places that you're going to encounter when you're out there on the Iowa River? So you decide, hey, I'm going to go for a canoe float, but I don't want to come back. So this is Hills Access. If you have your camper, you can go. You got your pet. Maybe your dog really likes hanging out on the river. Take your pet, park your camper down there, go put in at Iowa City, and float down and spend the night at Hills Access. You can do the same at River Junction. So here's River Junction. This is when we had Project Aware going down the river one year. Now from this location, River Junction, so Hills Access is on the west side of the river. River Junction is on the east side of the river. River Junction's got a lot of really cool history that goes with it as well. But from this location south, it's about 23, 24 river miles to the next access point, takeout point. So this makes it very difficult to paddle. We are working with Louisa County. We are doing some planning on the Iowa River, and we are trying to identify a midpoint between there that we can get another access point on the Iowa River Water Trail, and that will help with that. When you're out on river water trails, you're going to see signage that helps you as you paddle up to them, see what amenities they have there. So this identifies that this is a water trail, and it also has some of the amenities that you would have there. And then I thought I'd show you a quick video. If you were flying as a bird, this is what it might look like as you paddle down the Iowa River. You can see the S&G quarries behind there. This is the Iowa River. If you're really fun into reading, I love this. You can see the sandbar that's underwater there. And this is from our canoe race that was held this last Saturday, the Great Iowa River Race. We raced from Iowa City, Sturgis Ferry, down to Hills. And this year it was very windy, and so our fastest time was just about an hour, 60 minutes. For most paddlers, the average paddle speed is about 3 miles per hour. Okay? So these guys were doing about 9 miles per hour. So they were quite fast. But again, some of these, the guys that were getting that time were professionals. They travel all over the U.S. doing that. But you can see the Iowa River, in this section, we have a lot of concrete along there. It looks fairly clean, but some of us that are in the room have been out there and we've done a lot of cleanups. We've taken tons of material out. I actually think we took a canoe out or a cow tank right here one year. So we've removed a lot of that debris, but it continues to come back, and so we continue to do those cleanups year after year. So we were discussing earlier, if you want to learn about the Iowa River, aren't really confident, and you want to help pick up some trash, September 16th of this year, we will be doing our Iowa River cleanup event, and instead of racing, we're racing to see how much trash we get into our canoes. And so the county has canoes we bring out for the event, and we just let you fill them full of garbage, and we try to bring it back to land so we don't have it out there on the river anymore.
You never regret doing that.
That's right. unless you're stuck with me in your canoe. No, I'm joking. So Mike Hall is one of the realtors in town here. He was the one that flew the drone for us there. He had various video footage. Some of them I could not show you because the participants were making gestures they shouldn't have. They didn't know the drone was with the race. So they thought it was somebody invading their privacy on the river. So now, so I gave you a little background about the Iowa River Water Trail, but there are other locations that you can go out and explore, and we encourage people to do that. Terry Trueblood Recreation, Fin and Feather has a store there called H2O that rents canoes, kayaks, stand-up paddle boards. The Cedar River, I would really, as soon as I get this Iowa River thing locked down, I would really love to do a designated water trail on the Cedar River, maybe between Palisades, Kepler State Park, Sutlip Bridge being a midpoint, and then Cedar Bluffs or something down there in Cedar County as a takeout point. Lake McBride, the Corville Reservoir, and the Hawkeye Wildlife Area. Now, I put them in order, in my opinion, on how much more advanced you need to be. The bottom two, I love Lake McBride, but the bottom two get tough in my opinion, especially this time of the year. Big boaters love the Corville Reservoir, and when they see a canoe, they don't really know what to do with it, so they just speed up, I think. And so that can be a tough place if you're not an experienced paddler. And then the Hawkeye Wildlife Area is, again, another one where it's got so much backwater, if you don't know how to navigate, you can get turned around. We do have to pull people out of there sometimes because they get lost and they don't know how to get back out of there, so that can be a problematic area. So now I've got, I think, a few minutes left. I wanted to save some time for people to ask me questions on stuff since I just kind of had to fly through all this stuff. Now, remember, we do have folks at home. We want to keep them in line with what we're doing. So if you have a question, please speak into the mic. And
thank you. I found your talk very interesting.
Thank you.
I appreciate you making this possible. You had indicated that the average canoe speed is about 3 miles per hour. Prior to that, the question I had was how long would it take to canoe from Iowa City to the Mississippi? And if that's about 70 miles, that's probably not going to be doable in a weekend at 3 miles.
No, it is not. It is not a doable. It's not a weekend. That is a vacation, a destination paddle. If you're going to do the 72-mile stretch, Project Aware, Jim, do you remember? Mel, did you do Project Aware?
We're doing 5 days and we're doing about 80 miles.
80 miles. So there's your answer. We did the Iowa River for Project Aware. Project Aware is a statewide river awareness and trash removal project we do. We did the Iowa River one year, and it took us a full week to get down that stretch of the river, and we went all the way down to the Mississippi River. So if you're going to do that stretch, we encourage you, block off some time.
Look for a week.
Yeah.
Another question I had was, you've got some nice bags there, which you claim pretty much seal the water out completely. Mm-hmm. Where can you get these?
So there's a lot of great places. I don't know if Active Endeavors would carry them, Fin and Feather, Shields All Sport. Any of your local sporting goods stores or outfitters would have them. Any place that carries canoe and kayaks, I'm sure would have those. But I know Fin and Feather and Shields both have those. I'd have to check with Active Endeavors to see if they have stuff like that. But that gear, going into those stores that have personnel that go out and have these experiences is very important, because they have recommendations. They can say, hey, this one worked great, and I would recommend you taking it. Or you talk to somebody that's been on the river a lot, and they can say, these things are must-have. These things are, yeah, they're great if you have them, but you don't need them to survive. So, other questions?
Brad, the one thing that wasn't mentioned in the canoe essentials, a bow line.
A bow line, yeah. I'm kind of, but I do have one though, Jim. So a bow line, and a lot of times I take that for granted because I think most people have them, is a piece of rope that you have tied on to the bow of your canoe, okay? And it can be used for a lot of different things. If the water levels get really low, this is your tow rope, you're dragging your canoe with you, okay? If you are up in an area where you need to tie off, say you're in a brush pile and you're picking up trash, which happens a lot, you can use this to wrap around the tree. It has a lot of different uses out there. The other thing that Jim just reminded me I didn't talk about is I also always carry a river knife. And it's a knife that's not pretty, it's always full of sand, okay? But I can use it to cut those, cut ropes, other things that you'll find a lot of fishing line, unfortunately, along rivers. Wildlife gets tangled up in that all the time. And so that's nice to have those to remove that debris from the rivers. That is not a natural part of our environment. That is not how it was intended to be. So we want to get that stuff out of there. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, I have a question. As a complete newbie to this, if I want to take part in my first float, do I have to go buy all this stuff, or are there companies that will organize the float?
Great question.
And have the canoes?
So, yeah, there's all kinds of events. Judy's publicizing her over there, Seize the Carp event. Are you guys going to have canoes this year?
We will have canoes this year.
Oh, yep, she doesn't have a mic.
August 5th, it's a Saturday. It's an event called Seize the Carp. And we'll be spending the morning on the river with canoes and kayaks, so you can come out. We'll have life jackets, safety gear, everything you need to basically canoe in Iowa City from Lower City Park upstream and back down.
How do we find out more information?
Yes, to find out more information, you can check out our website, www.takeakitoutdoors.org, or on our Facebook page at takeakitoutdoors-Iowa.
There you go. And so, and then, like I said, Fin and Feather, Terry Trueblood, they have H2O out there, which is great to get out there. And then look for different things. Do we have an events page on the Friends of the Iowa River page?
We should.
Yeah. So I'm going to have Mel give us a little spiel here at the end, but there's a brochure back there called the Friends of the Iowa River, and that's an organization that promotes activities, promotes care and well-being of the Iowa River. And Mel and the rest of the people on the Friends of the Iowa River, there's a little small membership fee that helps us do these things, but these guys do all kinds of things, these people do all kinds of things to promote the health and welfare of the Iowa River. And some of those are canoe events, and we're doing one on July, sorry.
Yeah.
Give us that date.
Yeah, July 29th, we're going to have a very special paddle. You're invited. We're especially inviting the state legislators for these counties up and down this area, and the county supervisors of Johnson and Washington counties. We figure that a little river education doesn't hurt when you're making decisions in Des Moines, especially water quality decisions and things that have to do with the intersection of water and agriculture. Our legislature's been a little timid about that lately, and we want to encourage that in the best way we can. So that's the 29th, and I think our Facebook page will have it out first.
Yeah, and so if you're not familiar, pick up one of these brochures, check it out. This is a great organization to be involved with. We do a lot of really important things on all levels for the Iowa River. Mel, anything else I should add to that?
Yeah, I also have a sheet back there. Last year we did, I don't know if we hoped it would be our first annual, but it was an Iowa River report summary that covered a fair amount of the watershed and some of the issues. And the brochure will tell you how to be a member. If you want to join tonight, I can help you with that. $10, cheap. A family 15, student 5. Twist my arm and I'll charge you anything. So,
But yeah, so help out.
and
you know,
then that puts you on our email list too, and we have regular mailings that go out that way.
Yeah, and make you aware of the different events that are going on. So it's great to recreate in, but a lot of the other stuff that's important to get done, this group helped organize and coordinate, so we make sure all these people that are making decisions about our water are well informed. So, other questions?
And Iowa River Friends is how I found him to come give our program
Did we
tonight.
get you in the back? Did we get your question answered in the back? I know we're over the time, but they can cut a commercial for us.
I actually had two questions. The first one had to do with the flow rate. Is there a level of the flow rate that's going to make it no fun going down the river because of the sandbars and low
Yes.
stuff? I used to get caught on the English a lot, where you're half the time you're carrying the canoe
Yes.
at certain times.
I don't like to go when it's below 2,000 because I think there's a lot more reading than I like to do with the river, and it's tougher. Some people will go because they're really experienced and they like those challenges. I don't. So if it's getting that 2,000, 1,500 flow rate, then it's like, I'm going to wait till we get a little more water flowing down it.
And the other question had to do with the ferry that would get caught in that curve. that
Oh,
you had
yeah?
Up there, I can't remember what it's called.
The sweepers or the strainers?
Yeah, okay, well, no, not that, but that's another question.
Oh,
But,
Buttermilk Falls, yeah.
yeah, Butternut Falls, okay. Why is it that once they cut that through to avoid that, why didn't they open that back up so there's water flow instead of stagnant water caught there?
So that is not done by people. Very little parts of the Iowa River have been channelized. A few sections have. Hills, the section between hills was channeled in the late 60s, early 70s, but very little of the rest of the Iowa River was channelized. Now, down there, that was a natural occurrence. So when we get these high flood events, streams, that's their natural ability. Today, our rivers and streams have become so incised, that means they cut down into the bed, that doesn't happen as much as it should. So we back then, they would change channel all the time, and that piece got cut off for some reason, whether a flood event, a tree blocked the passage, but it cut its way through. Now, unlike a lot of other areas that have dried up, that one still contains water, and it still gets refreshed through floods, but it's not connected to the main channel anymore except for a little small stream. And it is still technically state land, the river bottom is, even though it's not part of the river, today's river channel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's really complicated. You almost have to be a lawyer.
So is that a nice wildlife area for the,
It is.
Turtles and-
Yes, it is. A very nice wildlife area. I'd like to have Johnson County own it, so, but we'll keep working on that.
and the one thing you were talking about, floating into a tree branch.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you have to do something to get out of that, to
Yeah.
stay alive.
So-
What is it that you're actually doing? Say I'm going down there and here it comes, and all of a sudden on my left, here's this tree in the way, trying to knock me over. What do I do?
Right. Well, the first thing is you want to do is you want to be able to read the river, and you want to stay out of those obstacles at all costs before you get into them. But if you do get into them, what a lot of people do is their natural reaction is either to grab a hold of something where the water flow is going to pull your canoe under, and then you're going to be stranded there, or they will lean into, they want to get away from it, so they're leaning out against it. You actually want to lean into it to keep your the bottom of the boat from getting pulled under, okay?
Oh, so
and then hopefully that can push
that
you
on the
through.
outside, so on the right side, if the water's hitting me, it's gonna right me up again
Right.
and make me able to,
But you don't
Clear.
you never want to lean into the flow of the river, because that's going to want to roll you that direction, okay? And each case is a little bit different, but say there's a rock right here. There's a rock on this side, and I come up against it. I want to lean into that rock instead of leaning into the flow of the water. Because if I lean into the flow, the water is going to push underneath my canoe, and my weight shifted that way, it's going to want to roll me.
I guess I don't quite understand, because here's the tree against me.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want me to go this way,
I want you to
you
go,
towards the tree or towards the,
well, it depends. Where's the flow of the water? I'm more concerned
on my
with the-
right?
Okay, so I want you to go into the tree.
Okay, thank
And
you.
also, on the canoe, if you lean the wrong way, water will start going over the
Yeah.
edge of the canoe.
And then it's really going to roll you.
How
So.
many people have such rich experience of doing it?
Yeah, yes. I can tell you how many times I've rolled it doing it the wrong way.
I was just going to ask you that. How many times have you rolled a canoe?
Yeah, a lot of times, you saw my picture there at the beginning with all of my trash in there, and then I'm still trying to navigate down a river, and the trash doesn't lean. it just goes where it wants to go. And so sometimes it'll roll towards the side of the water flow, and then you're going with it. And so then all the trash is back at the bottom of the river, and you're really frustrated, but you clean up and you start over again. So yeah, it's not fun, but it's a learning experience, and there are a lot of cameras and odds and ends stuff that are at the bottom of the Upper Iowa River as well. So I wouldn't give it up for anything, because that's part of the fun of doing it.
I just wanted to just say one thing is, if you're canoeing with kids, and I've done a lot of canoeing with young kids, I think getting them on the water is very, very important. I think getting kids outside is very, very important. I've seen a lot of people where their tendency is to put the kids on the floor of the canoe with the idea that they think, hey, I'm going to keep my kids safe by keeping them on the floor. What can happen is, if they're on the floor of the canoe and the canoe does tip over, your kid doesn't fall out of the canoe, your kid gets trapped underneath the canoe, which can be a very, very dangerous situation. So even though your intuition is to keep your kids safe and have them sit on the bottom of the canoe, it's much better for them to be on a seat or be elevated. So if the canoe tips, they've got their life jacket on, they get thrown out, and then you can just grab them and you're good, rather than getting them caught underneath. So I would just say, for safety purposes, that's one thing we've learned.
And you guys think it's all scary now, but it's not.
It's not
Those are
scary.
Just the warnings.
Totally.
Just have fun. Get out there.
Kids on canoes, good idea.
That's right. All right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for having me. Folks at home, we're running out of time.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming.